Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Caldwell County Department of Social Services Board meeting. Today is Tuesday, September 29th. We're meeting here in the Alding East Orange building, the City County Chambers. I'd like to get a meeting started by our Pledge of Allegiance and Invocation, led by Mr. Will Wakefield.
You'll stand, we'll do our pledge, and then we'll follow with an invocation. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's pray. God, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this time that we can gather and do the business of this county to serve our citizens. We thank you for our board members and their time and attention, and we thank you for our staff and the work that they do. And we just pray that all that we do would be to the benefit of those who we serve and those who have needs and those who have needs that are seen and are unseen. And we pray that you would guide us to help those who lack hope, who lack food, who lack medical care, and who just may need some strengthening of their families. And we just pray that you would guide us and guide our staff in all that we do so that we can serve them and serve you. In your name I pray. Amen.
Amen. So we'll get started with our, need a motion to approve agenda amendments from the Board of Directors.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
So I got a motion to approve. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Next on the agenda is approval of today's minutes. Needed a motion to approve those.
I make a motion to approve the, what are we approving?
The minutes.
The minutes. I'll second.
All in favor? I've got a motion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, please say no. Next on the agenda is reports, basics of social services budget, Mr. Will Wakefield, and Director Chris Conley, Business Officer.
All right, what we thought we would do today, since we do have two new members, was talk a little bit about the basics of what's in our budget, what's not in our budget, and how we receive reimbursement for our budget, kind of how it works. So Chris and I are going to tag team that just a little bit. So this will, hopefully, I think this will be helpful for our new members and kind of refresher for our more experienced members. So
Have you got new glasses, Chris?
I sure do.
They look really good on you. They make you
Thank
look
you.
smart.
I like
Thank
those.
you.
I was
Hey,
noticing-
whatever it takes.
Very stylish.
Yeah, I like those too.
Thank you.
So this is small. I think you may at times may be able to see that on your screen, but some of that writing in that pie chart is fairly small. But I'm just going to talk a little bit about, in general, what is in our budget. And so Chris will, when he does his report in just a little bit, he will talk about these basic sections that are in our budget, and you'll talk about these, or he'll go over these every month. So within our budget, administration. Now, obviously, administration, salaries, benefits of our staff, kind of standard normal things, operational expenses, anything, supplies, leases, our equipment lease, computers, paper, even expenses that we pay for our portion of keeping the building open and running. All those types of operational expenses, along with our salaries and benefits, falls into that administrative area, along with, there's a good number of other little pots of money for some of our contracts and bits of contract work that we have people do and things like that. So that all falls within that administrative area. And that, as you can tell, is the largest block at around, I think that says 67%. That's even smaller than what I can see over there. Child resources. Within the child resources area, the main part is foster care and adoption assistance. Now, there's some other small pots of money that fall into that child resource area, but mainly it is paying for foster care, paying for placements, paying for those placements with foster parents. It could be other different types of levels of placement. And within the foster care funding, there are multiple funding sources that fall into that foster care category, but it's all around having to do with those placements and paying for those, keeping those children in foster care. And then adoption assistance, and the funding that we pay, that assistance that we pay for children to families who have adopted our children. Get a little bit smaller, a good bit smaller, and move over to adult resources. Adult resources, the main part of that is special assistance for adults and adult special needs. Special assistance for adults is a part of the money that the county has to pay for individuals who are in what we used to call a rest home level of care. We call them adult care homes now. And for individuals who are eligible, they receive some assistance to be in that level of care. And so that special assistance is a portion of that money the county has to pay for, we're responsible for. Adult special needs, that's an area that you've heard, well, some of you have heard us talk about before. Mainly with our wards, we have around 50 wards that we're responsible for, adults that we are responsible for. And we use that adult special needs monies to pay for anything that those adults may need. Now, most of those adults have funding sources through Medicaid and other funding sources that we use that money to pay for their placement and their other needs. But there are some adults who, for whatever reason, do not qualify for those funding sources. And the county is responsible. Let's just say someone doesn't qualify for Medicaid for some reason, and Medicaid would typically help pay for the majority or if not all of their placement. Well, the county is responsible for anything else. So the county may have to pick up that tab. There may be some other items that those adults may need, some other special type of care. And if there's not a funding source for that, then the county has to pick that up. And so that comes out of that area. Temporary resources, you've heard us talk in the past couple months about our energy programs. You'll hear Martha will talk a little bit about those this evening. Low-income energy assistance program, or LEAP, crisis intervention program, or SIP, as you hear us talk about it. The county does not, that's 100% funded through state and federal funds, but it does run through our budget. So that falls into temporary resources. Then donated funds. We raise funds for different projects and things that we help families out throughout the year. There are people and institutions that do give us some monies each year, and so that falls into our donated funds. The smallest little sliver that you can't even see from here hardly is Medicaid. And when I say Medicaid, that's just a little bit of money that we've set aside, and I think maybe I mentioned last month, in case we have some sort of payback or something that for an audit or something like that. We've set aside a little bit of money to help us just in case we have something like that. And there's some basic Medicaid transportation costs that sometimes we have to help out with. But as you can tell, 67%, I believe, or about 2/3 of that is our administration. And obviously, the main reason for that is our staff are the main expense because of the services we provide. So you can't read each of those little boxes, but if you could, that's just different areas of staffing within our building. You know, the work that we do, whether it's with our eligibility staff, whether it's our social workers, we are working with people to help them get some sort of service, help them deal with some sort of need. And then we have the other services that come right behind that, our legal services, our accounting services, our customer service, that help those staff do the job that they need to do. But by and large, what we do, the work that we do is through our people. And so therefore, that is going to be the largest expense in our budget. So a couple of things that are not in our budget that a lot of times people get confused about. Food nutrition benefits. Now, our staff and our eligibility services, they're the ones who decide through policy whether someone is eligible for food nutrition benefits. We go through that process. We make sure they're eligible. We maintain that eligibility. But when someone is eligible, then those food nutrition benefits, the benefits that they receive, that's coming through federal funds through the state. That does not run through our budget. So there's about $2 million a month, a little over $2 million a month that goes into those food nutrition benefits that come into our county, which is great for those individuals to use, but that does not run through our budget. Same thing with the Medicaid medical care expenses. We determine eligibility for Medicaid. We set that up for people, just like with food nutrition benefits. But when someone goes to the doctor, when they go pick up their prescription and they use their Medicaid card and Medicaid pays for that, the cost again, does not run through our budget. That's coming from federal funds that come through the state. Child care subsidy. Child care subsidy is one of those areas that up until just a couple of years ago, it did run through our budget, and they've changed the program a little bit. Child care facilities are able to access their money kind of like medical facilities access their money. They go a different route. We set people up, make sure they're eligible and the amount that they receive, but then those child care facilities receive that money through a different pathway. So that no longer runs through our budget. Medicare and Social Security, I put that up there because again, we do not even do Medicare and Social Security, but a lot of people, but I guess because we do Medicaid, they do get that confused. So Medicare and Social Security are programs that we do not oversee. We interact with those programs, but we're not the ones who do it, and so that certainly does not run through our budget. So I did want to put that out there because that does confuse people from time to time. So I'm going to let Chris do the hard part, and he's going to talk a little bit more about revenue and reimbursement and some of those types of things.
So our total budget for this year is about $14.6 million in expenses, offset by about $9.6 million in revenues. And so a lot of what we do is work to maximize those revenues to cut down on that county dollar, because the difference between expenses and revenues is the county's participation in our budget. And our goal is always to minimize the county's participation. Our administrative revenues are determined really by the time staff spend working in the various programs, providing services, and documenting that time on their day sheets. Because through the monthly 1571 reimbursement report, that time is charged to the various programs that staff work in. Some of those programs might be reimbursed up to 100%. Not many, but some of them receive 100% funding up to a capped allocation. Most of the reimbursements are generated from uncapped funding sources such as 4E, Medicaid, food and nutrition services, and child support. Those are the primary uncapped allocations, but again, we have a number, 20 or 25 capped allocations that we can charge staff expense to. And so we work closely with our staff through the year to make sure we're maximizing the usage of our funding, particularly the capped allocations. The little graph there at the bottom of this slide gives you some examples. Our Medicaid staff are reimbursed 75%. And just to go a little further with that, we have just over 100 staff, just over 100 direct services staff who are completing day sheets. About 25 of those work in Medicaid. So as our overhead is distributed each month, then our Medicaid staff are picking up roughly 25% of all of the overhead cost. And again, that's an uncapped funding source. So that's an area where we pull in a lot of our reimbursements. Equipment purchases, reimbursement fluctuates throughout the year depending on the availability of CAP funding. Just for an illustration, we say they're reimbursed about 50%. That reimbursement can fluctuate a little bit during the year. As Will mentioned on a previous slide, adult special needs, that is an area where we receive no federal or state funding. So it's all county dollars that's paying for those needs. Over the past 2 years, our ward room and board payments have increased from about $15,000 to about $63,000 this past year. Doesn't sound like a real large number, but again, that is all county dollar. And most of that increase was related to one case in particular that we're still working on. It may get resolved as far as that individual ends up with a payer source that will cover those expenses, but those type of situations are probably going to continue coming up at a higher rate going forward than they have previously.
Will, have you guys, from the state standpoint, when you're dealing with the state issues and legislators, do y'all ever bring that up and talk about the need of state funding there?
Yeah, that area, the adult services area, and Chris can add on to that, is really, like in comparison to child welfare, is just one of the lower reimbursed areas. And that is an area that our organization, I say our agency, but also, you know,
Association is the word I was looking
and
for,
stuff
yeah.
like that, really push adult services because, especially now, as you know, we're an aging population, every county is seeing more and more of where they're having to assist in these types of areas. And so therefore, the counties are becoming more responsible, and we feel like that, I'll be honest, we feel like the state gets a lot of federal money, and they push that federal money on through, but then the state really doesn't step in and maybe put its piece in. So, but that's
Everybody's
something-
putting a piece in but the state.
That's kind of how we look at it, yes.
Yep, that's, I get it.
So on the previous slide, I mentioned the monthly 1571 report, and this is a mechanism that we complete in an online format for reporting most of our expenses each month, which are then cost allocated based on the FTE total working in each program. And we upload a lot of our information into the 1571, and which is the main tool for us receiving reimbursement on our admin expenses. One of our big expenses that's not reimbursed through the 1571, or one of our bigger expenses, are our foster care room and board payments. Those are reimbursed through a different mechanism and keyed directly to the state, but do not run through the 1571. A side note regarding the 1571, up until about 2013, it was due each month, by the 20th of each month, for our prior month expenses. Counties incurred the expense one month, reported it by the 20th of the following month, received reimbursement in the third month. So it was a continuous 3-month cycle. In 2013, the state said, well, we're going to start reimbursing counties in the month that you report your expenses. Therefore, they needed more time on their end, moved up the due date to the 15th, which was challenging because the 1571 report has a lot of detail in it.
Is 1571 what we used to call the green sheets, or the day sheets?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
They were green a long time ago.
That's a big driver in the report,
And then-
is getting the day sheets completed. And,
94.
I'm just kidding.
yeah, so the report's due by the 15th of the month now. Our newer board members aren't as familiar with this, but for the others, I stand up here about half the months and tell you we are a month behind in our admin revenues. That's because the state does not reimburse counties in the month expenses are reported about half of the time. So I just wanted to throw in that little history regarding the report. This is really another illustration of the previous slide that Will went over, that was the pie chart, and it's basically the same information in a different format. The blue column that's our reimbursements in each of the 5 departments of our budget. The red represents expenses. In administration, we're budgeted, and the numbers I'm going to throw at you are what we're budgeted for the current year. Our expenses are budgeted at about $9.8 million, of which $9.1 million is for staff cost. So the other $700,000 is operational expenses that Will touched on earlier, such as supplies, postage, our fleet maintenance, and some other expense lines. The reimbursements, $6.9 million, of which $6.7 is directly for the reimbursement of staff cost. So staff cost is about $9.1 million, but we'll pull in about $6.7 for reimbursement on those expenses. Child resources, we're budgeted at about $3.9 million in expenses. I'm sorry, $3.3 million, with $1.9 million of reimbursements. So we're budgeted for a county dollar of $1.4 million in child resources, but we should be nowhere near that amount of county dollar in that area. We should be well under $1 million at the end of the year unless there were just some dramatic changes during the year. Adult resources, you can't even see any revenue there because there is basically none. We're budgeted for almost $700,000 in expenses. That's primarily the special assistance expense that Will mentioned earlier. Our revenues are less than $24,000 in adult resources. There's basically there's basically very little funding in the
It's all
adult
county
service
dollars.
area. That flows over not only into our administrative expenses, but in providing services to our clients in that area as well. Temporary resources, again, that's primarily our energy assistance programs, which, as Will mentioned, are 100% reimbursed. So that's almost nothing more than flow-through dollars in that area, along with donated funds. And for all of those programs, we only spend up to whatever amount we received. Medicaid, again, the money set aside there is primarily to cover any errors related to Medicaid cases. Thankfully, we've had no major issues there in a number of years. That's basically the end of the slide presentation. We'd be happy to answer questions or respond to comments if you have any.
One thing to note for the 2 new board members, when he talks about county dollars, that's money that the taxpayers, local taxpayers, coming out of the county budget that is given to DSS. So when he refers to county dollars, that's what he's talking about.
And you'll hear us, kind of like Donnie's saying, sometimes when we bring you information or if we talk about needing to add a position or spend something, we always try to say, here's the county dollar so that you get that impact of really what that is, because that position might be $50,000, but in reality, the county's only going to pay $25,000 or $20,000 or whatever. So we try to speak in those terms so that you understand that this is the important part of the dollar that we're talking about.
For those that DSS has their wards, they have wards, you said there were about 50?
Mm-hmm.
Do you receive, like, if they get SSI or Social Security, do those monies flow through you, or do they just be applied to whatever services they're getting?
It depends. A lot of the times, I mean, it will go straight to whatever
the service.
their payment. We do receive some funds at times, and we have to make sure that that money then goes to whatever their needs
So
are.
you're basically payee, you're the payee
Yes.
for them,
Yes.
and you have power of attorney over their,
We
placement.
are their custodian.
Guardians.
Yeah, we are their guardian.
thanks.
Anybody got any questions for Chris? Will, you got anything else?
That's it. We just tried, we wanted to make it real basic so that when you hear that report each month, you kind of at least have some idea of what's in there, what's not in there, and what we'd like to do in several areas, certainly this area as well, is come up with some times when we can have a little more in-depth training. We can go more into detail versus trying to do that in the midst of a board meeting.
Yeah, I think it was great information, Chris, and it's always good to get a refresher of it. It's always good for the citizens that are viewing this evening to be able to see the different information, because we don't always get the same viewers, so.
Well, and as I said earlier, I mean, we work hard to minimize the county participation as much as possible, and, sometimes it's not optional, but
Right.
we certainly do that where we can.
And y'all done a really good job with that, and it's greatly appreciated by not only myself, but the rest of the commissioners as well. You might as well stay right there and lead us into the next part of our agenda.
Well,
The financial
some more
report.
numbers to look at.
That's it. Anytime there's numbers comes up, Will usually passes that baton.
That's right.
Well, he actually put together this PowerPoint, and I told him, there's probably a future for him in a fiscal job.
Oh,
if,
my, yeah.
Being director doesn't work out for
That's
him.
right.
I'm not interested. You have no fear about that.
Visuals are always helpful, though, so that
Yes.
actually is
Yeah.
very helpful, Will.
Okay, our financial report for August, as is always the case, we have 3 columns of numbers, beginning with our reimbursements received during the month, which totaled $779,688. Our accounts receivable for the month came in at about $963,000 as of the end of August. The far right number, the total of our expenses for the month was $1,004,038. So the bottom number on the page is our county dollar expensed for the month, which was $224,350. And I'll be happy to answer questions regarding our monthly report.
Any questions? All right, well, Chris, we appreciate that update, and thank you for all you do. You guys
Thank
do a
you.
fantastic job. All right, next on our agenda this evening is the director's report, Mr. Will Wakefield.
You'll notice on our personnel report, we have had several vacancies, and we've been fairly active with some recruiting. We have also had some in-house moves, and so as we've done that, then that just kind of carries on with then recruiting. You move someone, and then you recruit someone for that position, and that kind of thing. So we have been fairly active, but hopefully, we continue to try to get those filled as quickly as we can. I wanted to mention, and I don't know if I've mentioned since our new board members are not, have been here, the county and the state have received over the past, I don't know, I guess 6 months, there's different COVID money that has basically been flowing down, and school system receives money and those types of things to help, assist in different areas in terms of, whether it's your operations or staff or what have you, equipment, whatever, to pay for things that may assist you during this time of emergency. I will say that social services did receive some money, and Donnie and I have talked a good bit about this. Unfortunately, we received this money, and it was, the criteria were so narrow that we've really struggled to be able to spend it in the ways that we would like to spend it. It was specifically sent to us to be used within Child Protective Services and Adult Protective Services, and only in those areas in a very limited manner. So Kim and I and our adult services staff have really looked at different ways that we could make use of this money that fit the appropriate criteria. And we have been able to find a few areas, some technology needs and things that we're looking at. So we are going to be able to spend some of that money. I believe, Chris, if I'm not mistaken, I think we had 92,000.
Just under 92.
Just under 92.
Yep.
So, I mean, we're really looking at any way that we can figure out how to make that money useful, because, I mean, we don't want to return it if we don't have to. But it is, I will tell you, it is very narrow, but we are continuing to look for ways that we can spend that money, spend it appropriately and on things that can help our staff. But we are struggling to do that. If we've begged for further guidance and interpretation, and we got a little bit, and that was helpful. But so far, it's not gone as far as what we would like, so maybe we'll see a change in that, but right now, we are really struggling to spend that money. So
Have you guys looked at, I'm sure you have, but have you looked at some of the children that may not have access to technology, say laptop, to buy a laptop as a loaner to a child?
We go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was just gonna say, there is a separate pot of money that we have been allocated for children in foster care for those particular needs, educational needs.
Okay.
The money that Will is referring to is specific to protective services, so it doesn't cross over into foster care
I got
and
you.
adoptions. And so we did get some additional allocation for that, for those purposes, but this particular allocation was real specific in just protective services.
What have you been able to purchase with that money, just out of curiosity? If
We're-
it's something you can talk about.
Yeah, we're getting ready to purchase some mobile printer scanners, that type of thing, so
Okay, yeah.
our investigators, our in-home social workers can, whether they need to use those at home, whether they can take those, excuse me, with them, because there are times where we need to print out plans and those types of things that have to be signed. You may want to do something with a family right then and there, work on what that plan needs to be, print that out, have them sign off on that, give them a copy of it. So that's one of the things that we have been able to purchase. What we are asking the state to, again, kind of go back, which requires kind of going back to the feds who give us the interpretation, and ask, with some of this money, you know, you're saying Child Protective Services, might we be able to use some of this money in some way if there are families who are not in foster care that we're currently working with? Is there some way we could use that money to help them if there are needs that they have that would eliminate or help deal with the problems that we're having? So I'm hoping we may get some guidance to where we can use some of those resources to assist them, at least for right now.
Are they federal dollars or state or both?
It's federal dollars come through the state, and so all those
As a
ties
state.
come with it.
So, okay, so the feds send it to the state and then they disperse it to you?
Yes, yes. So
That's you, is that it?
that's it. If I'll entertain any questions you may have.
Anybody got any questions for Will? I will say along his, the director's report, one of the things that I did confirm today is I did talk to Lucas in the IT department, and he is working, I spoke to Will earlier, he is working on getting some of those documents and stuff that somebody would have to come and print off or be face-to-face to get a document. He is working on getting that done. COVID money will pay for those updates to the website. In fact, he would have already had it done, but the vendor that he was working with, after he got it all done and got to Ssbg, he found out that the vendor was a state contract vendor, and the vendor didn't tell him. So he's gone back to the vendor and said, hey, by the way, you're on state contract, you need to redo this, because it's going to be a significant savings by going through state contract. So the way I'm understanding is there'll be links to where, you know, if you need a specific thing, you can fill it out, and Lucas says it will be electronic back and forth. So that may be something you guys want to get with him on to make sure that you get exactly what you want, because it's a difference between what you want and what maybe an IT person perceives you want. So I'd make sure that you get him tied down and get exactly what you want from that, because that should be a huge help, not just for DSS, but across the whole county. All right, next on the agenda is Child Services Highlights. Ms. Kim Arnett, Program Administrator,
Good evening.
good evening.
So I want to talk a little bit about the results of a couple audits that we've been through. So last month, I talked about some audits that we were going through, and this month, I want to update you on some of those outcomes. And this will really kind of fall in, I look at the wall because I was looking at the PowerPoint, but this will fall in line with some of the things that you heard Chris talking about as far as funding sources and reimbursement rates. So I'll first talk about the 4E and Ssbg monitoring audit. And so what that is it is an evaluation of how we have either accurately or inaccurately assigned program or funding codes to each child we work with. That is through foster care and also adoption assistance. So the 4E is a federal pot of money. It's an uncapped higher reimbursement rate. So this review was looking at whether we had correctly identified children as eligible for 4E funding. And so what that involves is just a lot of intricate details about their status, their family structure when they are removed initially in foster care, their income. There's so many things that go into determining this eligibility, and there's so many people involved that it's a very detailed process. And so there were 4 cases that they looked at for 4E funding, and all of those were non-error cases. So we were very excited, very happy, very pleased with that. One of those cases actually went back to 2006.
Wow.
So when we're looking at, did someone correctly identify eligibility in 2006? Because if they did not, then that could mean paybacks all the way back from 2006 to current, because that was an adoption assistance case in particular. And so they will continue to receive adoption assistance until 18 or perhaps 21, depending. So that could potentially be a big payback, and we were very pleased to see that that was not the case in any of those cases. The Ssbg was looking at foster care cases, and that is a state reimbursement. It's a little bit lower reimbursement rate, but and not quite as detailed when looking at eligibility criteria. So those were also, there were no errors that were of any significance in those cases as well. There were 4 of those. So we were very pleased overall with that audit and the work that our supervisory staff and our social work staff do, and our accounting staff as well, that they, and also income maintenance. So there's a tie-in with all of those program areas in determining this eligibility. So we were very happy about that. The CFSR, the Child and Family Services Review, is another audit that we go through where a reviewer from North Carolina DHHS comes in, pulls a case at random, reviews this case, reviews all the documentation for the case, actually interviews the family. Now, this usually happens in person, but of course, right now, it's virtual or over the phone. They interview mother, father, any involved caretakers, and they also interview the children. They interview the social worker and the supervisor. So they pulled what we would call an in-home case, which is a case management case. And so most of you may be familiar, I've talked about case management. What that is after a family has gone through an investigation or assessment of a situation and there's safety issues identified, we need to continue working with that family to try to eliminate those safety concerns. Social workers meeting with them weekly, really getting services in place, trying to help the parents, help the children, and really monitor what's going on. So this particular family, there were 2 kids involved. There was a mother. They were living in a home with a family friend, and this social worker had worked with them extensively for almost a year. Now, that's usually not the case. However, this family was making progress, and so we continued to work with them instead of deciding to, have the court intervene, because even though they were making minimal progress, they were making progress. And so I would just want to say that particular social worker is fairly new to the agency, and her supervisor, Dana Phillips is the social worker, I'll just tell you, because she did a fantastic job with this case, and I want to give her that credit. Beulah Coley is her supervisor. Also, during that case, we had an investigator, Kayla Strickland, involved, and her supervisor, Richard Martin. And so all of that work was reviewed. The reviewer said that he could not identify one area that needed improvement in that case, and that was a very extensive involvement for our agency. He said that he was really impressed with our visit frequency and the description and observation of the family during those visits. He said he felt like he was sitting in the room with the family. He knew exactly what was going on at each visit, which is very important. And you probably have, I don't know if you've heard me say this or not, but our social workers have to do the work and then they have to write it all down. And so it's almost double what they're, and so it takes a very long time. But in this particular case, it was very important and demonstrated that this social worker was very invested with this family. He said that if every family spoke as positively about their social worker as this family spoke about their social worker, that North Carolina would be in great shape. He said this case will certainly boost North Carolina's numbers in regards to percentages of, contact with families, collateral, all those things that they measure. So he was very pleased and had a lot of positive feedback for us. So I wanted to share that and just brag on our social workers a little bit and our supervisors too.
Absolutely.
So that's all I have for this evening. Our numbers in August were very similar to the numbers in July. We suspect, I haven't seen our numbers for September on paper yet, but we suspect they're going to be up quite a bit with reporting, and also with foster care has gone up in September. And we expected that, so we tried to prepare our staff for that, but it has been quite a hectic month.
And is that due to school starting back and teachers and school
Just-
personnel
yeah.
being involved?
That's what we suspect. Children are being seen more now.
Right.
They're being talked to more. They have the opportunity to tell someone if something has been going on. We've seen increases in domestic violence reports, substance abuse reports coming in September.
And you had that large gap of time where children weren't being seen
Right.
from March until
That's right.
August, so.
And we know things
that-
didn't stop happening.
Yes, but they may have been delayed in
Right.
reporting.
Yeah, and that puts our agency and all agencies across the state, well, across the nation, in a difficult situation, because if someone reports something that happened 2 months ago, but yet it's not currently happening, depending on what that is, it really limits our ability to intervene. So
How is our foster parent, are we getting enough foster parents, or how are we sitting there? Do we need any? Are we always looking for?
we always are looking for
You're
foster
on
parents.
TV, so you got an
Yeah.
opportunity to plug it.
We're always looking for foster parents, especially for sibling groups, 2 or more, and also for teens. We really need foster parents for teens. We actually just put up a new billboard to recruit for foster parenting for teens, which can be very rewarding. So if anyone is interested, of course, then contact our
The
agency.
good news is about the teen, they don't have to worry about the baby stuff.
It's true. That's true. Very true. So we will, we'll see how our numbers for September turn out, but again, we expect some increases there. But-
How is it year over year? About the same? The cases year over year, the reports?
Yeah, I mean, it's been pretty steady. We see, for some reason, in March, things usually peak, and then in the fall, they usually peak. So it's interesting, not sure why in March, but it just seems across the board. I looked at numbers 10 years back, and it seemed every March was, for some reason, reporting numbers were elevated.
Maybe it's because people are out a little more, spring
I mean,
starts
spring
bringing it.
fever, I don't know, yeah,
Only thing I can
something.
think of.
Start wearing short sleeves and shorts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And people see
Maybe so,
marks.
yeah, maybe so.
All right,
Yeah.
any questions for Kim? Well, Kim, thank you so much. As
Thank you.
always, you've done a great job. We appreciate
Thanks.
what you guys do over there.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is Miss Martha Hedrick with Adult and Family Support Services.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Just to start with the numbers at the top, because we have had a pretty significant increase in some of our programs, specifically with food nutrition, Medicaid, and childcare. Since we've went under a COVID policy for many months now, a lot of those programs have just kind of continued to cycle somewhat on an autopilot. So if they were do a review in FNS benefits or Medicaid, and no paperwork was turned in or they were put on automatic, they just continued to re-enroll those clients. And then we also have anybody that's applying as a new applicant going on top of those numbers. So starting in the month of September, we're still under some pieces of COVID policy, and those are pretty much put in place to try to decrease some of our clientele having to come into the office. But they have re-implemented our workers start keying recertifications again effective September. So the numbers will start to decrease a little bit next month for those programs because it will be up to the client if they want to continue our service or not to turn in that paperwork. That'll be their responsibility. We are really trying to push people sending stuff through email still, going online and doing e-pass portal. Contacting the worker, and we're trying to do all verifications that can be done via phone. Any avenue that we can kind of come up with that our client has the capability of, and we can talk them through on the telephone. Our caseworkers have been absolutely phenomenal IT geeks, explaining these things to clients and making sure they understand how to get that from one place to another without having to come to the agency and see people face to face. But you will start seeing a decrease for food and nutrition, especially starting with September's numbers, and for Medicaid, because there are some that are still on extension, but they are opening up the optional way of terminating your Medicaid. And this month we have started seeing some people contact us and wish to terminate their Medicaid, moving out of state, things of that nature. So those two you'll start seeing to drop a little bit over the next couple of months. Child care, the number has went up. We've kind of worked through everybody that had come through and applied for wraparound. Excuse me, we had several applications for wraparound. We did start a waiting list 2 weeks ago. And basically, we're doing this purely for, we're having some issues with calculating the funding and kind of seeing where we stand by our state side. Just because all of our budgeting is very off right now with how to budget the proper percentage for children. We're used to school starting back, and we take all of our kids that are in summer track out and switch them in NC Fast to full-time school and before and after school care, wraparound, or morning only or evening only. And every county school system is doing something different. And the state cannot take a blanket approach for childcare on how to look at facilitating a change in NC Fast, because you can't make one change for one county and it be something that can be amicable across the board for all counties. So we have done some talk, and so what we've done is change the funding sources that we could to continue those. And we have spoke to the families that we do have waiting. We actually have 5 right now, and we were kind of watching and waiting for our numbers to come out the end of this week. And so once those numbers come out, if everything looks good based on what we've switched in the system by what we think is right, then next week we'll be contacting those 5 families and putting them on. So we're kind of doing it in like a bi-weekly basis with childcare. So you could kind of per se there is a waiting list, but not, because we're still monitoring those families. We're still continuing to add on any of our families that get approved for work first. Any of our children that come through with child protective services or child welfare are being straight approval. They are not being put on the waiting list. So these are just our employment-based parents. So we are very hopeful that we will get them on next week after we get the numbers at the end of this week.
And I'll just say it'll be interesting. Obviously, we know that depending on what the school system does in terms of, the elementary children, whatever happens with that, that then impacts again
Yeah.
the child care piece. But I would say in a, I would assume in a positive way.
I think it's actually going to give us a lot more stability, because our K through 5 is our biggest group for childcare, because, we're cutting off at 12. So our K through 5 is the group we watch the closest. If we're getting them in Monday through Friday and we don't have wraparound in the morning in Caldwell County anymore, it will be a lot easier for us to code, just after-school care. And that would definitely drop our percentage and open up a lot more, because right now what we're trying to do is, base everything off of, going through all of our Smart Start and then working backwards. So that would definitely open up our percentage greatly. So we would like to see that happen if possible, if that's the choice that's made, because yes, that would definitely open up where we were not going to have to worry about a waiting list. We're just trying to be very optimistically cautious right now.
Yep.
Martha, what do they do, like, since the kids are on an A-B type schedule? So, let's say the child's on an A schedule and they go to school Monday and Tuesday. So then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, are they in some sort of program, like an all-day situation? Is that
It's
sort of
dependent on what the parent's choice is. So for some of ours, the majority of ours that came in as wraparound applications, they are Thursday, Friday, full day, and after-school care, Monday, Tuesday, since Wednesday is deemed as a virtual day.
Right.
And there's no on-site care. So for the majority of those. Now, we have some parents who don't want to do after-school care on the days that they have their kids there the full day. So they only do after-school care on their non-school days on virtual, or full day on virtual. It's a very scattered scheduling. Our child care supervisor has been phenomenal with documentation. She came up with a beautiful template, went over it with the workers, so that if those records get pulled for audit, you can pull it up and see exactly where that child was each day, what we paid for, what the percentage was. So if we ever have to go back and change anything, it should, by the look of it, flow smooth like silk is what we hope for. But childcare has definitely been a challenge because of not knowing the unknown.
Yeah.
Any other questions on that? So, and I just wanted to touch base a little bit on energy, because normally that's our big thing that we're revving up for in the fall and preparing for winter. So the state is still on track to looking at doing automated approvals for all of our clients in Caldwell County that applied and were approved last year for the LEAP check, which is the automatic heating check that goes to their vendor. So those would be going out to vendors January 1st. So the second week of November, those people will get a letter in the mail letting them know that they will be pre-approved, and they just need them to check the piece of paper and make sure nothing has changed. And it's going to be basic information like your address, a telephone number, your residency, who all's in the home, and income. And if none of those things have changed, you fill out the paper and turn it back in. We'll go in the system and say you've turned it in and there's no change, and that information goes to the vendor. We're very much looking forward to that, because I think, with that being one of our most vulnerable populations, that will be a huge group that we'll be able to keep home and keep safe, so they're not having to come into the agency and apply. We have been meeting with supervisors, trying to prep for this year for different ways that we can continue to do things. We're really looking forward to the renovations getting done, so we're going to have some more open air spaces with protection for workers that we are going to have seeing clientele. We've been talking a lot about doing things virtually as much as possible. The e-pass application for energy goes online January 1st. Caldwell County is actually a pilot and helping. Will got us on as a pilot for that. So we're actually helping to create that application and what it will look like in the e-pass portal. So we're actually getting some say on what will work and what will not work, and trying to make it very simplistic for the clients. So it is very streamlined, very uncomplicated, very easy process, because energy is one of the more simplistic applications to complete that we have in income maintenance.
So let me ask you a question along those lines. If they're going to do an automated system, is there going to be any checks and balances to where, let's just hypothetically say I used it last year, but this year my financial situation's changed and I don't need it. But I get that form and I go, I'm automatically get this money.
You can correct me on this.
So is there gonna
So
be any,
the way that this was
not that we have
given
anybody
to
that's
us.
not honest in
Yeah,
our county, but.
so the only way that this has come about the automatic approval for 60-plus age households was through some COVID money.
Okay,
So what they're doing is a blanket approach across the state for all counties, and it is just an automated approval.
okay,
If they turn in the form and nothing has changed, they get it. If they turn in the form and something has changed, we adjust it, they still get it. If they don't turn in the form, the money will still be sent to the vendor, and they get it. They are just taking that pot of
I
money
get
that
it.
they received.
I understand.
So we won't have any.
But that's COVID money.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we will not have much adjustment on that.
And I think the reason they did choose that population was so that
Vulnerable.
they wouldn't necessarily have to come in if they.
Well, you
don't
won't
need
have
to.
as much of it in that population.
And not as many people.
Won't be as
And-
much changes, I should
Right,
say.
and most of those people, the ones that we serve are gonna be on a fixed income.
Mhm.
that If it changed, it didn't change.
A
So
lot.
the positive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I think that's probably kind of where they're looking at the risk
Yep.
involved.
Yep, I get it. All right.
Any questions?
Anybody got any questions?
Thank you.
Martha, as always, great job. We appreciate what you guys do in your department there, and
Thank you.
keep plugging to send back our thanks to your staff and yours too, Kim. Anybody got anything they'd like to say before we go further? So, our next meeting, board meeting will be Tuesday, October 27th, here at the same location at 5 o'clock. And hope you guys can join us on television, and you're welcome to come to our meeting in person. We got plenty of room here to social distance. We'd love to have you. With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
A second.
I've got a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, no. Motion carried. Meeting's adjourned.